And everybody, it is 11 a.m. on Monday, which of course means we are taking the time to bring in our geopolitical policy analyst Carmine
Broadcasting live
Atteo
from the
to the table
Financial
to
District.
help us figure out exactly what's going in on that landscape and, of course, how it can impact your portfolio. So, without any further ado, let's welcome in our man Carmine here. Carmine, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good, Gavin. How was your weekend?
It was good. It was good. Up in Raleigh right now, and at the briefing offices here at the moment.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, just
In
popping
America's
the head.
top state for business.
America's top state for business. Indeed, it is. So, Raleigh's just definitely blowing up here left and right. The whole Durham Raleigh Research Triangle area. It's pretty amazing to see. I've been down here now for 4 years, Carmine. I don't think I've ever walked outside the door and not heard a nail gun somewhere for a house being constructed down here.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but yeah, it's pretty hustle and bustle down here, which is nice. How about
Nice.
yourself, Carmine? How what are you up to these days? How was your weekend? Did you peel
It,
people at the card table?
yeah, it was actually a pretty good session. I had one of what I call a super session. So it was one of my best of the year, and those don't happen, too often. So when they do, you got to kind of salivate them. And I was there almost 14 hours on Saturday. So because it was so,
14 hours.
yeah,
Damn.
I
Hey, you
had
got to get out
breakfast.
in the sun at some point. You got to get some vitamin D at some point there, Carmine.
Actually, you know what? To be honest, I do take those. I do take those vitamin D pills because of that purpose.
So you don't have to go outside and you can play poker longer. Okay, I like it. I
Yeah.
like it. Well, that's good that you're coming off of a good session. So let's hopefully see if we can get everybody else in a pretty good session as well here too, with your insight and commentary on the geopolitical items
Yep.
facing the markets right now. So, Carmine, let's talk the discussion here. Obviously, a lot of headlines out over the weekend. Seems like Truth Social's always buzzing whenever we get into the weekend commentary. So let's talk a little bit about obviously EU and Mexico. We're in his targets, and this is after a pretty full week of letters that were going out and everything since the last time we talked. So why don't you give us a little bit of a recap and some of the things that you're seeing that's catching your interest on that front?
Yeah. So last week, as you mentioned, President Trump started sending out letters to all the various trading partners, basically letting them know that this will be the tariff rate effective August 1st. Now, if you look at a lot of these rates, what it is basically is the rates that were April 2nd. Some of them are a little lower, some are a little higher, but they're all pretty much around the April 2nd levels. Like for
Carmine,
yeah.
hold on one quick second. Is anybody else not hearing Carmine here? I could hear you fine, Carmine. Just double checking here. Hearing
I'll do
but
a
low,
test.
all good, loud and clear. So yeah, maybe if most it seems like most are hearing both. So if you're having issues, if you didn't mind, um, just doing a quick reboot, and hopefully that'll get you not the entire computer, but just in the trader room there. Maybe just log out and log back in real quick. But it seems like most people are hearing all right. So if you are having an issue hearing Carmine, it might be on your end. So apologies for that. But jump in and jump out and jump back in. But Carmine, fire away here. Sorry.
That's okay. So basically, yeah, it was basically the rates are pretty much what they were on April 2nd. There's some that are a little higher, some are a little lower. One country's different, but we'll get to that one in a second. But for the rest of the countries, they're all pretty much the same as they were on April 2nd. Canada is at 35. That's a little higher from the 25 from April 2nd. Mexico's at 30. That's a little higher from the 25 on April 2nd. Both of those, though, have USMCA goods excluded, so that's a significant portion of the trade. So it really is kind of like a tariff without a tariff, so to speak, a tariff in disguise a little bit, because the vast majority of the trade is under USMCA. So those tariffs aren't really as stringent as you would think looking at them face value. But there are some goods that are obviously are not under there, and those would be subject to those tariffs. So the EU is at 30%. That's the exact same rate as it was on April 2nd. Remember, these are total rates, including the 10%. That the baseline. So this is not on top of the baseline. This is all in rate. Brazil, that's the one that was most interesting from a standpoint of difference from April 2nd. They're at 50% now, and that's because President Trump's upset about the treatment of Bolsonaro at in Brazil, which of course raises a lot of questions because if you're able to put tariffs on that, there might be some legal issues surrounding that might uh, there's cases that are pending before an appeals court, then it'll be before the Supreme Court probably later late this fall or early next year. And then if he's doing that, I think it'll be more of an emphasis, I think, for the judges to strike him down. But we'll see what happens with that if they go into effect.
Can they
If
strike it down on a country by country basis, Carmine? I mean, because like if that comes through and the ruling goes against them, does that act as the ruling guide moving forward, or would it be, as sanctions on Russia, right? I mean, because if you're putting tariffs on a China or Russia, but then throwing one on for what seems like to be obviously political reasons on Brazil, how will that be differentiated? What would take priority there in terms of future rulings?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that if somebody brings up a case against that in particular, that they would, put in the language of the lawsuit that they want. This is just for Brazil and not for Russia and China. But we'll have to see if there's a lawsuit filed against. I'm sure there would be. Then we'll see how that develops and what the judges rule. But I'm fairly certain that if they decide to strike down the Brazil tariffs because of for political reasons, that presidents will still be able to issue sanctions against Russia and China and so forth. Um, and that'll be separated out, but we'll have to see once the cases develop. It's going to take a while because the original ruling, of course, was stayed by the appeals court. The appeals court's going to hear that in the fall, and then whatever that the appeals court decides is going to be appealed up to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court will decide probably late this year, early next year. So it's going to be a while before we know on the court front if anything's going on with these. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about that, so
What
to speak.
what would the futures be for that, Carmine? Let's just say, for argument's sake, in 28, a Democrat takes office. Let's just say it's AOC, just throwing it out there. And she goes in and decides to throw in 100% tariffs on Israel. She doesn't like what they're doing with Gaza and
Yep,
everything.
yep.
What, how does that look going forward, do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem because like you say, you're kind of opening up a Pandora's box, not just for a future president that might be on the opposite political spectrum of Trump doing something that the Republicans might not like. You also opening Pandora's box because your other countries could do something to us that they don't like. So let's say, for example, Russia. I mean, it'll be hard for Russia to do this because they're under sanctions. But let's say we held one of Russia's Putin's deputies in jail, and Putin doesn't like that. So he said, "Oh, we're gonna put 100% tariffs on you until you get that person out of jail." It just opens up the Pandora's box of other countries, not necessarily Russia, because again they're under sanction, but other countries could do similar things to us because that. Over political reasons as well. So that's what I'm concerned about going forward with this precedent was set with that.
Yeah. And like, how long would it take? I mean, would if something happened, would that go right to the court? The court comes back with the ruling. I mean, the courts, as we know, don't move too fast. So,
Yeah, exactly. That's
will
the
all this
problem.
precedents kind of be worked out? You figure in the next year, or do you think it's just
I
going to get cloudier?
Well, I think that, I've always said that I felt that the tariffs are going to get struck down by the Supreme Court, but it's going to take a while. Uh, but the tariffs I'm talking about are the emergency tariffs. The Section 232 tariffs, like the copper and the autos and the steel and aluminum and all that, those are pretty solidly legal. So those are, I think it will be a fine. But the emergency tariffs that he's imposing, such as Brazil, such as the EU tariffs at 30%, that we all these different letters, I think those will get struck down in a 5-4 ruling. And I mentioned that a couple months ago, and I still think that's going to be the case. And I think the Brazil situation will kind of push the justices in that direction. But again, it's going to take a long time because the wheel of justice, move pretty slowly as far as these lawsuits because you have to go through. The Supreme Court very rarely takes cases directly, right? Let's say if it has to go through the district court, it has to go to the appeals court, and like for example, Hasbro. they asked the Supreme Court to take the case directly without going through all the first steps, and the Supreme Court said no, we don't do that. So it's going to take a while. And I think this is going to be an early 2026 story, depending on how the justices rule in the Supreme Court. But if they rule that they are legal, that's obviously a big win for the Trump administration, but it's also a big win for any other future president who wants to use these tariffs in a way that Trump is using them now. It's similar to what you mentioned if we have a president AOC on Israel, because I think that would be something that she would probably do.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um, so, what else do you, I got a couple more questions, but is there anything else that you wanted to get off your chest on the tariff front, Carmine?
well, yeah, so just also the 50% copper tariffs he announced that those were going into effect August 1st. That's a positive for Freeport McMoran, SCCO. Obviously, for copper prices, they hit an all time high. Uh, Trump wants to have more production in the U.S., which they're saying that a lot of people are saying, like on CNBC, and say they were saying that they could possibly do, but it would take a couple years because they would have to
Yeah,
get
I
a
got the
lot of
mining equipment in there and
mining
everything,
equipment
right?
and everything, and environmental
So, do you view
regulation.
it as a positive for Caterpillar and Deere too, then?
Yeah, I think so. I think in a longer term, because I think they would have to sell more mining equipment, and then they said a lot of them, like Jim Cramer and David Faber were talking about. Well, we have a lot of the mines here, but there's a lot of regulations that prevent us from mining. We don't, and we have to get all the equipment in. We have to get everything set up. So it'll take a couple of years, but it's something that we could possibly do to replace the imported copper, but it'll take a long time. So again, like you said, Caterpillar and Deere, I think would be good long term plays as well off of that.
All right. And the reason for doing the copper mine is part of that just to kind of as a fight back against the rare metals that China is using
That
as
that's
a tool.
that's yeah, that's part of it as well. And then also, I think the Trump administration feels that, if let's say we have to go into a war, God forbid, and we have to build all this military equipment that needs the copper, we need to kind of make sure we have the domestic production in order to do that. So that's kind of what they're saying from a national security perspective as well.
Okay, and over the weekend there was a lot of reports about EU reaching out to some of the countries that are getting hit with some of these tariffs from the U.S. How do you see this working out? Because obviously the move for the EU and China is to kind of turn this into a world against the U.S. on the tariff front, right?
Yeah, that would be very negative
Especially
for.
since we're hitting basically everybody with tariffs. So, how
Yeah.
do you see that playing out moving forward?
Yeah, so basically, uh, if that happens, I think it'll be very negative for the dollar. I don't think that the countries will get together and impose get together and impose sweeping tariffs on the U.S. I think there'll still be a country by country retaliation, but they could get together and make free trade deals and kind of cut the U.S. out. And I think that'll be negative for Treasury bonds and the U.S. dollar if that were to happen. They also say while there's reports about that, there's also reports that they're wanting to negotiate with the U.S. So hopefully we'll see what happens, which way they go, and I think that'll a lot depend on. I think if they try to move towards a block, you might see Trump want to strike a deal further, or you might want to take a deal that he doesn't really like that much in order to stop that from happening. So we'll see how that develops.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else on the tariff front?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Let's talk about Powell. And it seems like there's obviously a concerted effort from the Trump administration to get him out. Over the weekend, we had Kevin Hassett talking about the authority to fire Powell because of the renovations going in. They're looking to use that kind of as a loophole. You had Bill Pulte, the FHFA director, coming out saying that he was encouraged by reports that Powell was stepping down, even though I was not able to find any such reports. But there obviously is an effort to get Powell out of there. I also saw what I thought was probably the most interesting article on this over the weekend was a Barron's article talking about Kevin Warsh and mentioning regime change at the Fed, where it just wouldn't be Powell to go, but it would be the entire Fed. So, what are you seeing on that side, and what do you think their end goal is? I mean, obviously outside of getting Powell out, but and how do you think markets are going to take all this?
Yeah, I still think that Powell's job is safe. I think they're still they're going to continue to do this though. I think this is an effort to try to get him to resign. I don't think it's going to work. But I think that this is I don't I think they know that they can't really fire him, and if they tried, he wouldn't leave, and they would get into a court battle, which will last months. And by the time that's over with, by the time that gets done, he'll be ready to go anyway. So I think that for now his job is safe. But Kevin Hassett did say that over the weekend on ABC with George Stephanopoulos, he said that Trump has the authority to fire Powell for cause, and he cited a lot of the what he says were cost overruns with the Fed building. I think he said it was like $7 billion over budget or something. So uh,
7 billion?
no, seven. I'm sorry, 700 million. 700 million.
Okay.
Yeah,
Seven,
seven
it's
hundred.
still 700 million for renos. I'd
Yeah,
like to see those. That just it seems like the entire building would cost 700 million. I don't know, but
yeah.
okay, yeah, that'd be one hell of an overrun, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, so yeah, so it says yeah, according to Axios, it says that the estimated renovation project is estimated to cost 2.5 billion, and the Trump administration is saying that it's 700 million over budget. So that's what they're saying right now. So uh, that's their claim there. For Powell's sake, he said that he's going to appoint, or not appoint, but ask the um, inspector general of the Fed, which is kind of the Fed's watchdog, to kind of look into the allegations and look into why the costs were overran and so forth, and see what he comes up with. And I think that's kind of a way for Powell to say, "Hey, we're looking into this, and we hear your concerns." And and just kind of help, maybe that'll help run out the clock, so to speak, on his term, so he does not get fired. But I think still, like I said, I still think for right now, I think Powell's job is safe, just because I think the repercussions in the market, and particularly the bond market, which I know the president and his administration pay very close attention to, it would be catastrophic. And I just don't think they're going to want to go down that path, especially since all we have to do is wait another, what is it, 9 months now, and he'll be able to be replaced. So I think for now, I think his job is safe.
Well, obviously they're trying to set the precedence here with in
Yeah,
terms of
exactly.
the definition of firing with cause, right?
Yeah,
So let's say Trump comes out and been like, I don't need anybody to review this. It's the numbers are obvious. He's fired.
yeah.
Gives a good big old NBC "you're fired" apprentice type tweet. Um, what happens there? Is that it for Powell? Is he gone? Obviously, courts would have to get in. I guess there would be a stay on it. What would be the steps? How would that look?
Yeah, so the courts will probably immediately intervene and say, "Hey, the Fed is independent," because the Supreme Court actually ruled earlier
Right.
this year that Trump has the authority to like fire people from the FCC and the FCC and the FTC and so forth, but he doesn't have the authority to fire members of the Fed board. So because of that ruling, I think it will immediately get stayed. And then, like I said, it will have to go through the district court, the appeals court, and all back up to the Supreme Court. And by the time that happens, I think Powell's term will be over. I don't even think it will get through all that. But by the time, he gets his term is over. So I think that's probably going to be the calculus going forward. But like you said, they're going to continue to berate him. They're going to continue to tweet about him. They're going to continue to criticize him almost every Fed meeting. Even if he lowers rates in September by a quarter point, they're going to say he should have lowered it by a half point or a full point. So that's going to be that's just what it's going to be. And I think that, but I think for now that, like I said, his job is safe.
Okay. All right. Moving on then. Let's take a look at Congress. Since the last time we talked, Carmine, the one big beautiful bill was passed there. So why don't you give us some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Congress did pass the bill meeting the president's deadline. I said that when we were off, I think I told you that Trump probably had the best 2 weeks of his presidency with the Iran strike, and then his agenda passing. But I think the last week with the tariffs, I think probably was one of his worst weeks of his presidency. So it's just kind of back and forth there as far as political. Uh, gamesmanship there. But the bill itself, again, it includes the extension of the 2017 tax cuts made permanent, spending cuts, Medicaid and green energy, deregulation, energy reform, immigration reform. Get $100 billion for deportations and building a border wall and border security. That's a lot of money for that. I think that's probably a record for that. Actually, 100. I'm sorry, 170 billion. So that's even more. So also one of the more interesting things, the bill requires most solar and wind projects to be phased in by service by 2027. This is not as onerous as the original legislation. I think the alternative energy investors are a little heartened by that, but it's still pretty negative for those producers, especially starting in 2027 once once those tax credits go away. So overall, it's a negative for the alternative energy space, like the solar and wind stocks, but it's not as negative as it could have been. Nuclear power is a big winner in this. Those credits will last until 2036. Hydrogen will last until 2028. So nuclear power again, you look at NLR or CEJ, all those will be winners off this bill. EV tax credits will end in September 2025. So if you want to get a car with a tax credit for an EV, you better buy it now, because in a few months that is going to be over, or in a couple months actually, that's going to be over. The Medicaid work requirements are going to start in December of 2026, which is right after the midterm elections. Uh, so and the Medicaid provider tax will drop to 3.5% in 2028. That's the tax that federal government pays to states for purposes of Medicaid. So the lower that tax, the actual lower the cost of the bill, right? So the higher the tax, the higher the cost of the bill, because that's not really a tax like you would normally think of it as. It's a payment to the providers, the states that they're sharing the cost of Medicaid. So the lower that goes, the lower the cost of the bill goes. So also the bill raises the debt ceiling by 5 trillion, so we won't have to worry about the debt ceiling for a couple 2.5 years or so. Um, and the SALT deduction is going to go to 40,000, but that's going to revert back to 10,000 after 5 years. So kind of a compromise position there between a lot of the reps from states like Texas and Florida who didn't like SALT at all. They would prefer it at zero, to be honest. And folks from New York and California who wanted it at 40. That was kind of the compromise that they came up with. The bill does a lot of several other things. I'm not going to go through them all, but the deficit impact is 3.3 trillion over the next 10 years. So we'll see how that manifests itself, according to the CBO. So the Trump administration says, well, the Trump administration basically says, the CBO's growth estimate was a little understated, and if they're growing at what we were growing at during his first term, then that deficit wouldn't be nearly as big. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that's kind of where the bill is right now. It's passed, it's signed, and it's pretty much everything that President Trump ran on, domestically speaking, not foreign policy wise, obviously, but domestically speaking, it's pretty much everything he ran on in that one bill.
All right, Carmine. So that's the one big, beautiful bill there. Now, House Speaker Mike Johnson, he had promised some future spending cuts on the reconciliation bill. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, there's a sucker born every minute.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
I'm going to lose weight in a couple of weeks too, Carmine. So
yeah. So, one of the this made me laugh a little bit over when they were talking about this, because House Speaker Mike Johnson basically told the fiscal hawks, I know you guys want to cut more spending. We can't do it now, but we'll do it in the next bill. So, I just find that very hard to believe that they're going to be able to get that passed, because if one of the reasons why this was able to pass is because you had so many goodies in there, right, so to speak. You had tax cuts, you had no tax on tips, you had all kinds
all
of
the Alaska pork that was in it.
Alaska carve out and all that. So there's a lot of things in there that a lot of people liked, right? Even though they didn't like some of the other things. But the idea to have a bill just like cutting Medicaid. Let's say we're going to have a reconciliation bill that just cuts Medicaid. That's not going to go over very well. I mean, yeah, the fiscal hawks will love it, but it's not going to go over well with the moderates. And like I said, like for example, like in the Senate, they won't get they might get Rand Paul on board, because he probably definitely was vote for that. But they'll lose like Susan Collins. They'll lose Lisa Murkowski, and it'll lose North Carolina's senator as well. So it might be 50-50 in the Senate, but once it gets to the House, you have at least like 8 to 10 moderates who don't want to really do a bill like that. So I don't see any chance at all really that that passes, just like a bill that cuts Medicaid, so to speak. So, that's how I feel about that. But that's what they were told. We'll see if Johnson can do it or not. But I'm really skeptical of that.
Okay, Carmine. While we've been talking, I haven't noticed any headlines, but obviously expecting comments about Russian sanctions coming today. What's your thoughts on that at the moment?
Yeah, so President Trump said he supports a bipartisan Russia sanctions legislation, which is sponsored by Lindsey Graham. This bill could get a vote later this month in the Senate. The bill would impose tariffs up to 500% on any country that buys oil or uranium from Russia. So that's pretty much targeted at India and China, right? So
And that would be
basically,
tariffs on any product, right? Not just oil
exactly,
and uranium.
exactly. So it's pretty onerous. It gives Trump a lot of power. I mean, I think he could kind of do this now if he wanted to, it basically it gives him a lot of power to put those.
Would that include like Germany buying that gas or anything like that?
Yeah, any country. The bill's really broad. You can impose any country that buys oil or uranium from Russia can get a 500% tariff, up to
It seems
500%.
it seems like a possible loophole for Trump to throw a lot of things in. I mean, we had Canada, right, with the fentanyl. What was like 50 pounds of fentanyl coming across the border from Canada, so that put them under the national security risk, right? So, is this another loophole for Trump to
Yeah,
just kind of be able
absolutely.
to pound whoever they want for tariffs?
Yeah,
But it's got
absolutely.
bipartisan support, from my understanding.
Yeah, it does. It does. And so a lot of people want to get a lot of people want to be tough on Russia. So it has Lindsey Graham supports it, and also the senator from Blumenthal from Connecticut. He also supports this. So I'm sure some of the other Democrats support it as well, and it'll probably get well over 60 votes. I do wonder though, as we get closer on this, if there's going to be some drumbeat from the Democratic side saying, "Hey, this kind of gives the president kind of a lot of power, so to speak, on the tariff front, right?" And I
Yeah,
wonder
the
if that's
language of that bill is going to be
yeah,
pretty important to close
it'd be
out
pretty important.
loopholes
So, I
like
mean,
that.
yeah. So like let's say this bill gets posted, right? And I could see, even though Blumenthal says, "Oh yeah, I'm with it right now," once this bill gets posted, I could see like a lot of the Democrats saying, "Hey, wait a minute, this gives the President Trump a whole lot of power that we're trying to take away from him with the courts, right?" And if this passes, this kind of this might nullify that, so to speak, because he'll have a legal way of doing it. You know what I mean? So it, that's the kind of the what I'm watching for
Yeah,
is
I'll be
if
curious to see how that plays out.
yeah, because if they kind of give him this, I mean, they're like, okay, you're kind of giving the guy the keys to the keys to the tariffs, while you're trying to have the courts take the keys away. So I think that might be a little. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that the Democratic drumbeat on that kind of rise up. But we'll see.
Okay. And what do you think the knock-on effect would be on some of the oil and mining industries here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be positive for oil prices. Obviously, there'll be less supply on the market, but the problem with this is that if you post a 500% tariff on China, you're basically having an embargo on China and
Yeah.
India, and we saw what happened. We did that last time, so it's it might actually be a negative because the global economy would be so weak that oil prices might fall, and that's what we
Supply
saw.
falls or demand
Yeah,
falls, I should say.
demand
Yeah.
falls, yeah. So, it'll be interesting as to how it plays out. He doesn't have to do 500, by the way. He could do anything from 0 to 500. So
Sure.
you could do 499 if he wants. So,
Or one,
so
right?
for well, yeah, yeah. So, but that's also, but we'll see how that plays out. But also, President Trump told NBC's Kristen Welker on the phone over the weekend that he will make a major statement on Russia today. I assume what that's going to be is that he's going to meet with NATO, and he's going to allow offensive weapons to go to Ukraine, because there was been some reporting from Axios on that already.
Yeah.
And that's what that announcement's going to be. He's going to allow Ukraine to have offensive weapons. So, I mean, it's kind of a interesting turnaround for him, right? And I wonder how this might impact the MAGA base, because the MAGA base kind of basically, is basically like screw Ukraine. I don't care about
No
Ukraine.
foreign wars, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
It
uh,
seems to me he's upset that after he got off the phone with Putin, Putin ordered a huge drone attack, right?
yeah,
So
so that's so he feels like he was embarrassed, right? Because he said, he said, "Oh, Putin wants to talk," and then Putin wants to talk, and then he does a strike, and so I think he feels like, hey, I got to be a little tougher now. I think Lindsey Graham actually has kind of been in his ear a lot lately too with the Iran strike. I think in Trump's mind that was a success, even though it might have not been. Put completely demolish the facilities, like he said. They definitely sent him back at least a few months. So I think Lindsey Graham's kind of in his ear saying, "Hey, you can have similar success with Ukraine that you had on Iran." So we'll see what happens with that.
okay. Um, Anything else on Russia? What time should we be expecting those headlines, Carmine? Because obviously that's something that could rattle the markets. Do you have any idea?
So for the bill, for the bill, I think that won't pass until probably later this month. I think it'll be sometime before the August recess when that bill passes the Senate. But I think I think for
The major
uh,
statement.
for the statement on the weapons to Ukraine, I think that could come today.
Okay, okay, but
Yeah.
no idea on time, right? That could come
No,
out
no.
at any
He's meeting with
time.
NATO right now. I think he's actually talking to the press. While he's meeting with NATO, so he's doing one of his Oval Office press conferences. Yeah, he's meeting with the head of NATO right now in the Oval Office, and the press is asking him questions, and he's talking about the Patriot missiles and everything. So you'll probably get a confirmation here from the White House shortly on that.
Okay, so be aware, headline risk looms out there for anybody trading in the indices today. All right, Carmine. Next up, House, they're set to vote on stablecoin legislation this week. So where do we stand with that? When's the vote? And obviously, Bitcoin's been having a pretty big run up ahead of this.
Yeah, so they said early this week, and that probably means Tuesday, I would guess. I think this is going to pass pretty easily. A lot of the Democrats, they don't want to vote for it because they feel that crypto benefits Trump's family-owned businesses. So
Well, he
they
does
don't want
have
to
his
vote.
own Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, he does have his own Bitcoin. So
Or crypto coins.
yeah, so I mean, I'm not saying it does or doesn't. I'm just saying that that's what that's their view. But yeah, it's but the the House will probably vote on Tuesday. I think it'll pass, and this will go to President Trump's desk, and it'll be a win for the crypto stocks, Robinhood, Coinbase, and MicroStrategy. I think all would benefit on this. You see Bitcoin at all-time highs. We'll see if there's maybe a sell the news reaction because this has been signaled for a long time. This passed the Senate about a month ago,
Right.
and they're just waiting to get. I think they were hoping to get bipartisan support in the House. That probably won't. I mean, they might get a few people, but it won't be overwhelming like it was in the Senate.
Yeah, I agree with your take on a possible sell the news scenario for Bitcoin. So keep an eye out on those Bitcoin miners out there, MicroStrategy, all those names tied to Bitcoin. And we'll keep you updated on when we see any headlines from that. All right, Carmine, last thing. The America Party, Elon Musk talking about building a third party. Looks like he's trying to grab about 8 to 10 seats or so and be a kingmaker, right? So, what's your take on that? And what's the history of third parties in the states?
Yeah, I mean, not very good, and I just don't think this is going to have much impact at all. He said he's going to target 8 to 10 House seats and 2 Senate seats. Now, it depends on which 8 to 10 seats he targets. If he targets swing seats, it might take some votes away from either side, and then that might swing those particular seats. But if he targets like pretty safe seats for either side, it's not really not going to make a difference. Because I don't even think his candidates will probably get like 5 to 10% at the most. So in a safe seat, it's not going to switch anything. But if it's a swing seat, like maybe I'm thinking like Los Angeles suburbs, New York Westchester, and so forth, and Eastern Pennsylvania, where swing seats are in the House. He could possibly have an impact there. But we'll see if even if it comes to pass. On Poly Market, they have about a 54% chance he'll create a new party. So that and he already announced that he would. So there's just still a significant amount of doubt in the betting market community that he will actually follow through because they feel that his board, the Tesla board, wants him to focus on his businesses and not politics, which is that they feel is hurting the stock. So that's going to be another aspect of it as well. So I think
Yeah, I
less.
saw he was doing a shareholder vote on XAI, right? So
Yeah,
this will probably be something gets brought up, don't you think?
yeah, exactly. So and maybe if we'll see at the shareholder meeting if there's like a resolution to say, hey, focus less on politics or something, and we'll see how many votes that gets. I would like to see that, but we'll see what happens with that.
All right, Carmine. Well, we hit a pretty wide range of topics there. Just did we
Yeah,
miss anything?
that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, as per usual, Carmine, we always appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, talk a little bit how these politics are potentially hitting the markets and everyone's wallets out there. So great information for everybody. As per usual, we have recorded this. We'll be posting this a little bit later. But Carmine, thank you again for taking the time to chat with us this morning.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you in a few.
Bye.